Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Maritime SoftwareHub, the People Podcast. My name is Callum Beaumont, the host of the show, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Robbie Hodgkiss, who's the Head of Business Development at CargoKite. Today we're going to be talking about reducing emissions through shipping technology. So, Robbie, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to, I know we met in person a few months ago, and now it's awesome to finally sit down. So please, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation, Callum. So as you said, I'm head of business development at CargoKite, and so my background was I started out in tech when I was quite young, like 16, 17, and I was developing a website with a friend of mine, and we basically developed this website whilst we were still at school and sold it to a company whilst that was in London, and we continued to kind of work on the website whilst we were at school as well. So that was I started out in web development, and then through a kind of a bit of luck, I ended up in shipping. I was I would after university I was teaching English in Madrid, and ended up teaching English to a manager of a shipping firm out in Madrid. And one day, walked into the office there and saw this massive model of a container ship, and was just kind of like knew like this was the I knew I didn't want to teach English for the rest of my life, and I kind of thought, oh, this is really interesting. This is something that I could do. And so I started off in reception in this company, and then kind of worked my way up after a little bit of time, and worked in the import department, and then with refrigerated containers. I then studied at the Spanish Maritime Institute, kind of doing night classes there, which was a really great experience. It improved my Spanish as well as my knowledge of shipping. And from there, kind of moved into the oil tanker industry. There was an opportunity to work in operations at a shipbroker in Madrid called Medco, and I started out in operations there, and then moved on to the actual broking side of things, so working kind of on the spot market and chartering. And this was a really great experience. It taught me a lot about the markets, but then I got the opportunity to move back to England, to move to London, to work for OSG, and was working on the Aframaxes there in the North Sea. Did my MBA, and then worked in at Sovcomflot doing the Aframaxes in the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and the Caribs. So kind of that was the original, the first part of my shipping career. After that, I was always very keen on shipping technology, and even at Sovcomflot and OSG, I'd been very keen on working with a kind of what was called like VBA, which is basically like a programming language for Excel, and kind of used that to make my workflow a little bit more efficient. But I'd always wanted to get back to the kind of the tech side of shipping. Even though I love chartering, I was always had this sort of feeling that I hadn't done something that I should have done. So I went traveling for a little bit, and then ended up in a job with a company called Synfio, which was what you would call kind of real-time transportation visibility. And I was basically kind of like overseeing the customers that they had there, and ensuring that the kind of the product was fitting with what their requirements were. And my responsibility there was mostly we were tracking mostly tracking containers, but also tracking kind of ships, and tracking trucks, and tracking trains as well. And as part of this, I was working on this project for RailNet Europe called the ELITA project, the electronic ETA project, and we ended up winning the contract to provide ETAs for the RailNet Europe system. Oh, wow. And this was in 2021, around that period. So from being a very small startup, we then sold the startup to Project 44 in 2022. I stayed on a bit of time to ensure that the customers were handed over and so forth. I then started working for a freight forwarder, essentially helping track vessels and work out the shipping schedules for certain container vessels. And then one of my colleagues who had been at Synfio with me was, unbeknownst to me at this time, working as a consultant for CargoKite, and they were describing to him some of the issues that, or some of the challenges they were facing, especially in terms of getting people with industry knowledge who understood the sort of technical aspect of shipping as well.
Yeah.
And so that was how CargoKite was introduced to me, and that was how this role came up with CargoKite, and the opportunity for me to actually work somewhere where we were actually building a vessel that we were designing ourselves was a really great opportunity. So yeah, so that's kind of my life story up to this point, Callum.
No, amazing. Thank you very much. I mean, it's quite rare to see someone that's kind of covered most aspects of shipping. So the broking side, obviously on the logistics side, the tech side, and the owning side as well. So it's really a great kind of perspective for you. I guess now, obviously at CargoKite, could you give an overview of what they do basically and the business?
Yeah, so the background to the company is that we have three founders, and there's a lot of links to the Technical University at Munich here. But one of our founders had studied shipbuilding, but was also a very keen kite surfer. And from this, he kind of came up with this concept of having quite a small vessel that could be pulled by a ship. And the sort of the idea of CargoKite was born from this sort of this concept. And, fast forward a few years, and we were looking even up until earlier last year at the concept of these what we'd call kind of these micro container ships of 16 TEU vessels. Obviously, as I said, being with the main propulsion coming from a kite, and the idea was at this point that almost like all of the propulsion was coming from the kite. You would need very little actual engine input. But what we found is that given the economies of scale of having only 16 TUs on board and the conversations that we were having with customers, this was not going to be the most economical way of approaching this challenge. And the challenge was to kind of decarbonize shipping and provide cheaper transport than would otherwise be possible to our customers. And so after a kind of various interactions with customers who were all saying, you need to go for a bigger ship, we've now come up with a ship that's around 280 TEUs. So, and that's a nominal capacity. So, you're talking around 210 TEUs at 14 tons, the so-called homogeneous capacity.
Okay.
And the design is a catamaran. And the reason for this is that with a catamaran, if you're actually getting your energy from a kite, you can rely on the wind coming from a much wider range of angles without actually interfering with the stability of the vessel compared to a monohull. And so I know what a lot of people will be thinking when I'm talking about a kite, especially if you're from our generation, Callum. We kind of remember the first time that the kites were put on vessels about 15 years ago. And what was happening then is that the kites were being retrofitted onto vessels, and the kites were also being put right at the front of the vessel. Now, the difference between what we're doing here is that we're designing the vessel around the kite, not applying a kite to a vessel that is not designed to be pulled by a kite.
Okay.
But we're also attaching the kite into a different position on the ship. And that's basically nearer the center of lateral resistance. And what this means is that you don't lose so much stability when the kite is pulling the ship. But you also, one of the main issues with the monohull vessels when they were being attached at the front, the kites were at the front, is that when the wind was behind you, the kite would pull the vessel in the correct direction. This was fine. The problem is that when suddenly you have a ship wanting to go in that direction and you had the wind coming in that direction, the kite would start pulling the vessel in this direction. And so obviously you then have to start using the rudder to correct the course. Now this means that the wind is utilized in a much less efficient way. You may be using the rudder, and a lot of the larger ships, they simply were not designed for the rudder to be used in such a way. And so this was a kind of a not very efficient way of using a kite with a ship. And so what we found, certainly in our initial studies with the catamaran and the location of the kite within on the ship in close to the center of lateral resistance, what we found is that these forces don't need to be counteracted as much with the rudder at all. And this basically means that we can provide real significant reductions in carbon emissions per container compared to the vessels that we're comparing ourselves to right now. So it's really exciting. I think that I'm a big fan of any sort of wind assisted propulsion system, but the sort of the theoretical savings that we're looking at right now with kites, and particularly with this vessel design, are pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, I can tell that you're very passionate about it, and it's great to hear a bit more about the actual kind of the mechanics behind it, and the thought about the designing the different structures and things. So I guess you did touch upon it there, but I guess, I mean, in what ways do you think the solution is going to help reduce emissions? I mean, I guess from my point of view, will it be solely powered by the kite, or will there be an element of of engine and sort of wind propulsion?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will have diesel electric motors on board as well. There was talk at one stage of us using electric motors and trying to go completely zero emissions. There are issues at current costs for batteries for longer voyages that doesn't currently make economic sense. That's not to say that it won't in the future, but no, we will be using the engines most of the time as well. There are conditions. For example, when you get the wind coming at like 120 degrees or 240 degree angles, and it's absolutely perfect sailing conditions, and we will be able to effectively turn off the engines in those conditions. But all of the feasibility studies that we've done so far, I mean, you do have to use fuel. It's just that the use of the fuel is reduced by a significant amount. And what I don't want to do is start giving out kind of blanket figures, because wind is not distributed evenly over the planet, and it depends very much on your routing, the direction that you're taking, and so forth. But yeah, I mean, on certain routes, comparing ourselves to like and I tend to give these figures on a per container basis, because that's kind of the fairest way of doing it. But compared to like kind of an 800 TEU, an 800 20-foot container vessel, nominal capacity, on some routes in the North Sea, we're looking at reducing carbon emissions per TEU by about 68%, 70%. So that's a massive saving. So for people looking to ship their goods and really interested in saying that your goods were shipped in as green a manner as is possible, I think that our solution will be there. And certainly some of the customers that we're interested, we're talking to at the minute, they themselves have customers, shippers, who are very interested in this aspect of the sort of being able to say that their goods are being transported in a green manner as well.
Yeah.
On top of this, because you're also, so one thing is that the ship is smaller than the bigger vessel, so you lose out on economies of scale compared to, say, an 800 TEU vessel. But because the savings in the fuel are so significant, you actually can transport the goods cheaper even without those economies of scale.
Yeah, and what type of routes are you mainly thinking? Like, is this going to be more kind of short sea around kind of Scandinavia, Europe, or do you think there'll be kind of longer voyages? Do you think possibly?
Yeah, currently almost all of the feasibility studies that we're looking at are short sea, and the predominant interest right now is coming from Northern European clients. And I think that's for obvious reasons, because of the external pressures put upon shipping companies right now with the implementation of the ETS system, and also with Fuel EU Maritime. So I think that it's the kind of the acceptance of it is a lot more enthusiastic in European countries. And yeah, a lot of the customers tend to be operating in these the North Sea, in that particular area.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of really interesting things going on with wind assisted propulsion, and there are kind of quite interesting things with the Fuel EU regulations when you really dig deep into it. That even if you, I mean, we're not going to retrofit, so it won't, this particular use case won't particularly benefit us. But even if you kind of retrofit a wind assisted propulsion system onto your vessel, and you don't even use it, you could be looking at reducing your greenhouse gas intensity measure by between it's either 1 or 3 or 5%, depending upon the force matrix that is provided by the supplier of the wind assisted propulsion system. So there is this kind of incentivization from the European Union to actually implement wind assisted propulsion, and so that helps any sort of uptake of this kind of these new technologies is also benefiting us with the kite as well. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we're seeing, I mean, you obviously have the adoption of now sails and things that are being fitted on board vessels, and there's quite a lot of investment, I would say, going into that space. So really exciting, and what you guys are doing sounds very, very interesting. And I mean, I guess from your perspective, where do you see kind of some of the key kind of changes in the maritime technology markets kind of going forward? You mentioned obviously fuel EU and the kind of regularity sort of influences that might change things, but is there anything in particular you see as a possible big next kind of next wave of tech?
Okay, so I mean, obviously we're into wind assisted propulsion systems, and I think I've evangelized enough for that already, right? You can clearly see I'm enthusiastic about that. But the other aspect that also we're interested in at CargoKite, we were initially wanting to have our first vessel to be, mostly autonomous. But that's not going to happen. We're trying to solve one problem at a time. But I'm also really interested in the future of autonomous shipping. And I think that we're at a really interesting moment in time where this is just taking off. And it's something that's kind of being held back by some technological developments and then some regulatory developments. And I think that a lot of people are a little bit nervous about investing in R&D because they don't know about the regulatory environment. But I think that also what we're seeing is this, and I'm quite proud of the UK in this sense, that the UK actually seems to be quite go ahead with this. We've got some, in certain parts of the UK, in the legislation that we already are talking about unmanned vessels. Of course, you've got to, this is the problem with autonomous vessels. You've then got to, is it remote controlled? Is it autonomous? And there's a slight, there are slight nuances there, of course, as well. You might have somebody remotely controlling a vessel. So I think that we have legislation kind of coming in the UK that might make it easier. We also have kind of memorandums of understanding with nations such as Belgium, Norway, Denmark, Holland, and the UK all signing up to it as well. Notable exceptions are France and Germany there. But I also see that we may see, as we've seen throughout history, defense needs kind of, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And I think that we might see investment from the defense side influencing the civilian side of this as well, and speeding up some of the acceptance in terms of the regulatory environment as regards autonomous vessels. The UK is just, the UK, we're a country with more admirals than warships, right? So I think that, we probably need a bit more investment in the autonomous sector. And I think that various nations in Europe are currently seeing the concerns about not having your undersea cables protected or monitored or defended. And so I think that we may see the investment into this kind of trickling down into the civilian use of autonomous ships,
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, you mentioned about the defense piece. So I think it was last month I actually went to a conference in Virginia out here in the States, and even at the airport there was a big banner, an advert, and it was, I can't remember what the name of the company was, but it was basically a defense software company advertising for like recruiting. And I was like, I've never seen a maritime technology like advert anywhere outside of our little bubble of our world that we live in and all our media and LinkedIn. But it was fascinating to see that they're obviously really pushing it out in that region. So it was really exciting to see.
And were they? Was it a trade show you were attending, or?
Yeah, it was for the port technology event. So it was great to sort of learn a bit more about all the different kind of suppliers and what's happening on the port infrastructure side. And the Port of Virginia were the main kind of hosts, and you got to see different kind of vendors from areas. Some are more to do with the actual kind of container stacking sort of solutions. like how you actually kind of, once the container goes into the port, like tracking, registering, and even things like the drivers for the trucks and getting in and out effectively, monitoring them. There are lots of interesting things. And it's a big thing we're trying to do now while we're out here, is get a better understanding of how technology is impacting the port infrastructure, as well as just the vessels. So it's really interesting.
And where do you see the main advances coming from in terms of port infrastructure and technology?
When we were there, I must have met about 5-10 people from Canada, and it just seemed like places like Vancouver, Ottawa, Toronto, a lot of it seems to be a lot of investment going on there, and even some of the other vendors, they're from places like the port of Long Beach and LA. They flew over, so I don't know specifically maybe some of the biggest hubs that are adopting technology the most, but the suppliers who are mainly our kind of clients, really, the tech companies that stand around the event and speak to people, they were from places like France, India, obviously the States and stuff. So it was just exciting to see that side of shipping, and how it's growing out here in particular.
Oh, nice.
That was cool. Good. Okay. Yeah. So I really appreciate, obviously, good overview of CargoKite. So what I'd like to do in a moment is perhaps dive a bit deeper into your day-to-day role and obviously the function of sales and leadership, what you're doing. So before we do that, is there anything else you'd like to discuss about the topic today and efficiency or the business itself?
No, I would just say that as I've already said, I think it's a really exciting time. I think that there are many challenges for decarbonizing. I think that we have various kind of regulatory hurdles to overcome right now, or certainly people in shipping have to deal with a lot of new regulations all the time. And that the way the wind is blowing is that we all need to decarbonize as much as possible. So I think it's I think the combination of new technologies, combination of decarbonization and autonomous shipping as well is it's a very, very interesting time to be involved in shipping.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, we've focused our business on shipping and technology the last sort of 6 years or so. So it's been a really exciting time. I'm obviously my family's from shipbroking, similar to you sort of thing. So back then, I mean, I remember back in sort of 2007 up to sort of 2010, using really kind of antiquated sort of software systems and things. And now when you look at people like C and the Signal Group and Vesson and what those sort of platforms they have to help brokers and charterers and things, it's really interesting and exciting to see. So your side of the business, the decarbonization and that area, the more vessel performance side is also very, very exciting, and the growth in that phase. So it's awesome to see what you're doing.
Yeah, I was talking to some people from kind of my old days about that, and kind of asking them recently about how they found that technology has changed since. I mean, I probably started around the same time as you, so probably like 2007, 2008, and I remember, I think I used to have to send faxes to somebody as well, right? Yeah. So, I never had to send a telex, although I think you have to be trained to do that. But I did have to
my granddad always says, every time I see him, he's like, back in the day, we used to send telexes, go to the Baltic Exchange, all this sort of stuff, like the tickets and things, like it's so different.
But I love the way that a lot of the recaps are written in a way to make it less expensive to send telexes, right? And I don't know if they're still written like that, but even when I was, a lot of the abbreviations and so forth were there to kind of save the money on your telexes because it was so expensive to send them.
No, it's changed so much. I actually spent about 9 months living in Greece in 2006, like part of my university placement year. So I got to spend some time working in 3 or 4 ship owners' offices and also the Royal Bank of Scotland at the time, just to sort of get a feel for shipping finance. And it was fascinating to see how some of those ship owners, even back then, were using software and were using technology. And then they would sort of sit me down, like some of the bigger, I think I worked at Moran Gas for a month or so with the Angela Cusi building, which is awesome. And they sat me down and walked me through some of their platforms and how they track their fleet and that type of thing. And that was, nearly 20 years ago. So it just shows obviously how much things have evolved even since then.
Yeah, so some of the people that I was talking to recently were just describing the importance of being able to track your own vessels, but also the vessels of the competition as well, but also the ability to track cargoes kind of programmatically or in these platforms as well, and understand your last three cargoes. Now you don't have to call up the owner to find out. You can kind of like know that already. And one of the interesting things from my conversations that I found, well, the first thing is that they say that there are far fewer conversations on the chartering desk right now. I mean, far fewer phone calls on the chartering desk right now. But the other thing is that with all of the technology available, you can do a lot more research on your own without making a lot of noise. And so the actual fixing of vessels can be done quite discreetly and quite a targeted manner. If you have a cargo and you don't want to make a lot of noise, you can work out which ships are actually, using Q88 and checking out their last three cargoes, seeing when they're going to be berthing, all these things that otherwise would have maybe caused a lot of noise in the market, but now you can do it a lot more discreetly and get things done very quietly. So it's quite interesting. I mean, I think that I left Sovcomflot in 2017, so I think even since then, it's there have been massive changes in the sort of the technological landscape. But again, it's very interesting. But also from what I hear, there's still opportunities for new things, and a lot of the solutions are really good, but a lot of companies use various solutions. Even though one solution might do everything, they find
Yeah.
that one company does one thing better, another company does another thing better. I've heard stories of one company doing really good port costs, and the whole system being kind of subscribed to because of the port costs, because that's really
Yeah. Yeah.
important when you're chartering oil tankers. But I've not heard yet of one company that I've spoken to that uses just one product and says, "Oh, this product does it all." So it's quite quite an interesting case.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Really, really exciting space at the moment. Okay. So if you don't mind, we'll focus on the sales side. We won't take up too much more of your time, but just love to learn a bit more. So now you're in a head of business development role. So what does a day to day look like for you typically?
Well, I mean, I think in any startup, that you're kind of your jacket buttons over various responsibilities. It's not as kind of you don't have tasks that are as sort of specific as you would in a larger company. So, I mean, in business development, what you traditionally say that you would solely do there is kind of you identify, analyze, and pursue business opportunities. Now, and that might incorporate sales. You might have, even in a startup, you might have a separate sales department. We don't, so we kind of we incorporate that into our team. You might have a separate marketing department. We don't there, so we kind of incorporate that there, and we're kind of conscious of what we put up on LinkedIn, and we might be handling that.
Yeah.
But a lot of it depends upon. There's a lot of research being done, a lot of kind of looking into, for example, trying to estimate the consumptions of particular vessels, so that before we approach a client, we can say, actually, we think that this vessel might be consuming this. We think that this is this ship. We will know. We'll check Alphaliner that the ship is operating on this route. We'll go, okay, so how many containers are being moved? You'll then look at the ports that it's going to. You'll then try to find out the port costs of that particular route, and you'll start to see, who might be interested in this from a sort of an analytical perspective. But that's also on top of getting out there to like I saw you at the conference in Hamburg and so forth, getting out there to conferences, talking to people, finding out which companies are open to this new way of doing things. Some companies are more receptive than others. Some companies are very interested in the green aspect of it. Other companies are more interested in the savings aspect of it. So it's about trying to identify and analyze these business opportunities. And again, it's about understanding the market, understanding shipping, following what's going on, seeing what other developments are taking place, reading trade winds every day. So I'm a shipping news junkie. So that's not a hard part of my job, but making sure that we're up to date and being able to talk with potential customers in a way that lets them see how we can help them with what they're looking to do, be it save money or be it reduce their carbon emissions.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, yeah. So I guess in terms of the sales side, do you have a team that supports you? Would you say, like, or are you mainly doing it yourself, and you're wearing a number of hats?
Yeah, we have people internally. So yeah, and obviously we kind of we have like a CRM system and so forth, and we try to keep people updated with our progress and ensure that any sort of new developments that we have, we can actually get out to customers and potential customers and say, look, this is what we're doing. This was a test that we did, and this was the result, and so forth. And we try to we have some people who are kind of, a lot of people in shipping are like, okay, this is interesting, but why now? Can I not wait a little bit before I make a decision? So you kind of have to keep people warm and highlight what you're doing that's new, and kind of maybe rekindle people's interest, remind people about what you're doing, and and hopefully kind of get them over the line at some point, to sign a letter of intent or so forth. We've got DFDS signing a letter of intent with us, so that's a big name that we're very proud of.
No, fantastic. I mean, so it's very much is a consultative type of sale, isn't it? Like almost an education piece. So we've worked with people like Blue Visby in the past, and Napa, and companies like Sirocco, obviously, on the weather monitoring and weather routing piece. And I think a lot of the sale is just telling them, like, keeping at it and informing me about the benefits and trying to really kind of not persuade but educate. So I guess that's a big piece, obviously, with what you guys are doing.
So how do you guys at Cordell Beaumont organize that? Do you kind of like try to get to every single conference? I mean, a lot of the conversations that we have, it's like, is it worth going to this conference? And I think we saw each other at SMM in Hamburg, right? And I think we're like, I mean, this is a really big one, right? It's worth going. And I think that's one of those ones that's absolutely unmissable. And having a stand is really important, and just having like the fact that people come through and then they recognize you and all this. But there's a lot of things where you've got to kind of weigh up the travel and weigh up the time away and all this to see if it's actually worthwhile. And that's always a challenge. I mean, there are so many events going on, right?
Yeah.
And you just be on the road all the time, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done it before where I booked in too many, and I've had to cancel one or two of them. And you think, what, actually, it's better to use to go to this event. But I think for us, it's having that face time. If we know our existing clients are going to be there, then it's really worthwhile to get a chance to see them in person. And obviously, we try and build new ones. But yeah, it is a big investment, and especially if you're we're more of a lean kind of recruitment agency, big budgets and things. If you want to try and sponsor events, we used to work closely with Smart Maritime Network, and they were fantastic, and we used to go sponsor their events and travel around with Kathy and the guys, Rob there. So I really recommend those if you ever get involved. But Smart Maritime Network. But otherwise, no, we are very selective about where we go. And now, obviously, I'm in the States. There's a number of events. I mentioned Virginia last month, and CMA coming up this next month. So we try and be very selective, as you said. If you go to them all, you end up just it's a bit saturated, and it takes you away from, I guess, the day-to-day kind of sales as well.
Yeah, but again, nothing beats meeting people in person, right? So
that's the sort of trade-off. And I keep saying that to my wife, like, I need to get out, go see people. And it's always a battle to try and get out. But like, otherwise, no, I agree. It's worth it. Cool. All right then. Well, no, I really appreciate you running through all that, and it's great to learn more about your background and the company CargoKite. So, just last couple of questions, if I may. So, I guess outside of work, when you get a moment, what type of things, sort of hobby-wise, and sort of things do you like to get up to?
Oh, most of my time outside of work is family time, which is great. But in terms of hobbies, I've kind of rekindled my interest in ice hockey recently, which is great. I grew up going to watch Whitley Bay Warriors in the Northeast when I was a kid, and I've kind of forgotten about ice hockey, but it's quite big here in Berlin and also in Munich. So I, try and get when I get
Yeah.
an evening free when I'm down in Munich to go in there and
We
try and
have
get out here as much as possible.
we
So
have so sorry to interrupt, but we have the Tampa Bay Lightning out here.
right, yeah,
And they're massive. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's Amalie Stadium is it's not too far from us, like half an hour away. And I think the season's still on, but yeah, it definitely is on our bucket list to go watch a game. I think they won the Stanley Cup a few years and all that sort of stuff. So I'm learning the lingo a little bit, but
Excellent.
really
Well, I mean,
cool
that's
sport.
that's the really high standard stuff, right? The NHL. So I'm jealous of you, but yeah, the standard here in Berlin in Germany is pretty good. So, but yeah, I mean, the NHL is a different level. So
Yeah, it's
that's
cool.
good.
You go to some of the parks here, like just general parks, there's fields and like swings and things for kids, and they've got like skate parks, they've got ice rink, well, not ice rink, like hockey rinks,
Mm.
basically. So you'd use skates and stuff, and then baseball cages and things. So it's so well kitted out for sports and things out here. I guess depending on the area, but yeah, hockey's huge here, as you say. So it's really cool. And
I've heard
NFL,
that if you have a kid who gets into ice hockey, it's a very, very expensive
is it?
sport. Like you're talking like thousands and thousands a year in terms of getting ice time. In the States, it's like
Oh
really,
wow.
really expensive. So, yeah.
See what our kids do, but okay, mate. Awesome. Well, no, I really appreciate your time, Robbie. I guess obviously if anyone wants to reach out to you and learn a bit more about CargoKite, what's the best way for them to do so?
I think, check out our LinkedIn page. You can quite easily contact us through that. Maybe we can put my email in the show
Yeah,
notes
well,
if it doesn't mean I get spammed too much.
no problem.
But
I'll put the
yeah,
website there as well.
yeah, that would be great. So that's fantastic. Yeah. So Callum, really, thanks very much for the invite. And yes, I think anyone wanting to contact us, we're really interested in hearing from you if you're interested in chartering one of our ships. But we're also interested in, we're always looking for people, and we're interested in people, with the kind of a business background, with a tech background. If you got a wind assisted propulsion system background as well, absolutely. Please contact me. And I was just referring to any sort of bots taking my email for the spamming, but I don't want to put anyone else off
No problem.
to contact me. So please get in contact, and yeah, I'll look forward to hearing from people.
Awesome. All right, Robbie. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you to everyone for listening and tuning in. So yeah, see you soon, and thanks. Yeah, speak again soon.
Thanks very much, Callum.
Pleasure.